Over 2 centuries, 46 presidents. Some became symbols of courage, unity, and leadership. Others, well, they became case studies in failure. Today we're going head-to-head, 5 of the most loved presidents in American history, and 5 of the most hated, from those who lifted the country in its darkest hour to those who nearly tore it apart. This is the ultimate comparison. And we're starting with a man who led with vision, compassion, and consequence. Abraham Lincoln is the gold standard of American leadership. Taking office as the nation splintered into civil war, Lincoln faced a country already on fire. But through unwavering conviction, he preserved the Union, abolished slavery, and redefined what it meant to be American. The Emancipation Proclamation, the Gettysburg Address, and his second inaugural speech are still quoted today. Not just because of their words, but because of the weight behind them. And while the war he oversaw was brutal, Lincoln always saw it as necessary to secure the promise of freedom for all. He didn't just save a country, he reshaped its soul. But what happens when a president faces the same crisis and does nothing? That's exactly what happened with James Buchanan. Elected just before Lincoln, Buchanan watched the same tensions build and chose to stay on the sidelines. As southern states seceded and the country veered toward war, he believed the Constitution left him powerless to act. His inaction was more than cowardice, it was catastrophic. Instead of leading, he hoped the crisis would solve itself. It didn't. By the time he left office, the country was shattered, and historians to this day rank him among the worst ever. But where Buchanan stalled in the face of collapse, the next president took control in the face of disaster. Franklin D. Roosevelt walked into office during the Great Depression, when unemployment hit 25%. Banks were collapsing, and people were lining up for bread. And somehow, he made Americans believe again. The New Deal brought jobs, infrastructure, and safety nets like Social Security. His fireside chats made people feel like they had a president who understood them. And when World War II broke out, he didn't run from it. He led the nation through it. FDR was elected 4 times because he didn't just guide the country through one crisis, he guided it through 2. But while Roosevelt's leadership was defined by bold action and moral clarity, Andrew Johnson's was defined by stubbornness and sabotage. Taking office after Lincoln's assassination, Johnson had a chance to heal the nation. Instead, he fought against civil rights, vetoed Reconstruction bills, and openly sympathized with former Confederates. Where Lincoln sought unity, Johnson stirred resentment. He was impeached by Congress, barely escaping removal from office. His presidency didn't rebuild the nation, it delayed its recovery by decades. But where Johnson fumbled a post-war recovery, the next president created something that would outlast even wars. Theodore Roosevelt didn't wait for permission, he took charge. Known as the Trust Buster, he took on greedy monopolies, stood up for workers, and preserved over 230 million acres of natural land, laying the foundation for the national parks system. He redefined what it meant to be a president, not just a passive administrator, but an active reformer. His charisma was unmatched. He once gave a full speech after being shot in the chest. But Roosevelt wasn't about ego, he was about impact. He used power not to elevate himself, but to fight for the public. Which makes the next president's abuse of power feel even more jarring. Because Richard Nixon had power and threw it away. He opened China, ended US involvement in Vietnam, and even helped launch the EPA. But none of that matters in the shadow of Watergate. Caught ordering illegal wiretaps and covering up crimes, Nixon became the first president to resign in disgrace. Trust in government plummeted, and the name Nixon became synonymous with corruption. And while Nixon's downfall showed what unchecked ambition can destroy, the next leader proved that hope, real, lasting hope, could rebuild what was lost. Barack Obama inspired a generation not just because of who he was, but because of what he stood for. The first black president in U.S. history, Obama entered office during the Great Recession. He passed the Affordable Care Act, supported LGBTQ+ rights, oversaw the mission to kill Osama bin Laden, and helped rebuild America's economy. But more than any policy, people loved him because he made them believe again that dignity, calm, and compassion still had a place in politics. He left office with high approval ratings and an image of presidential grace. But the man who followed him brought the polar opposite. Donald Trump's presidency was nothing short of a political earthquake. To his supporters, he was a fearless outsider who took on the establishment. To his critics, he was a walking constitutional crisis. From the Muslim travel ban to separating migrant families to 2 impeachments, his presidency was riddled with chaos. His downplaying of the COVID-19 pandemic and his role in inciting the Capitol riot on January 6th left a deep scar. And even after leaving office, his influence continues to divide the country. Trump challenged every norm, but long before any norms existed, one man set the bar. That man was George Washington, the first and arguably the most respected. He could have been a king, but chose to step away from power. He limited himself to 2 terms, warned against political parties and foreign entanglements, and built a tradition of peaceful transfer that held for over 200 years. He didn't just lead a revolution, he defined the presidency itself. His humility and restraint made him a symbol of what the office should be. But not everyone followed his example. Herbert Hoover came into office with a background in business and public service. But when the Great Depression hit, his lack of action turned a crisis into a catastrophe. Hoover believed in limited government, so he refused to provide direct aid to struggling Americans. Shanty towns were renamed Hoovervilles. His name became a punchline in breadlines across the country. People didn't just dislike him, they blamed him. He didn't cause the Depression, but he became its face. And by the time he left office, Americans weren't just desperate for change, they were desperate for a leader who cared. From Lincoln's legacy of freedom to Nixon's legacy of betrayal, from Roosevelt's reforms to Buchanan's silence, these presidents shaped America in ways that still echo today. Some left behind monuments, others scars. So, who do you think deserves the title of the most loved, and who really earned the hate?